had always been the kind of teenager who found trouble in the most ordinary places. At 17, he possessed that unique combination of curiosity and recklessness that made his mother worry constantly. Today, however, his wandering nature would change not just his life, but the fate of countless worlds across the galaxy. The abandoned mining facility on 442C had been closed for over 50 years. Corporate records listed it as depleted, worthless, a hole in the ground that had given up all its secrets. The colonists who remained on this backwater planet mostly ignored the rusted structures that dotted the landscape like metal bones, but had always been drawn to forgotten places. He squeezed through a gap in the security fence, his backpack catching momentarily on the twisted metal. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of the planet's purple vegetation and the metallic tang of old machinery. His breath came out in small puffs as he approached the main shaft entrance. The elevator platform groaned under his weight, but the ancient mechanism still functioned. As he descended into the darkness, activated the flashlight on his wrist device. The beam cut through shadows that had remained undisturbed for decades. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, creating an irregular rhythm that echoed off the tunnel walls. Level after level passed by his makeshift elevator. The mining operation had gone deep, far deeper than most people realized, had done his research in the colony's digital archives. This facility had been one of the first established when humans arrived on 442C, back when the planet held promise of rare mineral deposits that could fuel humanity's expansion into the galaxy. At the 15th level, something made him stop. Call it intuition, or maybe just teenage rebellion against taking the easy path, but felt compelled to step off the platform. The tunnels stretched ahead of him, different somehow from the others he had glimpsed during his descent. The walls here seemed smoother, more deliberately carved. His footsteps echoed as he walked deeper into the tunnel. The beam of his flashlight revealed tool marks that looked wrong somehow. Too precise, too geometric. Human mining equipment left rough scars in rock and ore. These walls showed patterns that spoke of different technology altogether. 20 minutes of walking brought him to a chamber that definitely wasn't in any of the mining company's blueprints. The space opened up around him like a cathedral, with a ceiling that disappeared beyond the reach of his light. But it was the far wall that made him stop breathing. Embedded in what looked like natural crystal formations was something that clearly didn't belong. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a mining tool left behind by careless workers. But as approached, the impossibility of that explanation became clear. The object was a blade, nearly 4 feet long from tip to handle. But calling it a blade seemed inadequate. It appeared to be carved from a single piece of material that shifted between deep black and silver depending on the angle of light. The surface held patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them, like writing in a language that predated human civilization. Reached out tentatively, then pulled his hand back. Every survival instinct screamed warnings about touching mysterious alien artifacts, but curiosity had always been stronger than caution in his particular genetic makeup. The moment his fingers made contact with the handle, the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded his mind, stars being born and dying in cosmic cycles that spanned eons, civilizations rising and falling across the galaxy like waves on an endless ocean, and through it all, a sense of vast intelligence watching, waiting, preparing for something yet to come. He saw the builders of the blade. They called themselves the architects, though their true name was a concept that human minds couldn't fully grasp. They had walked among the stars when Earth was still a ball of cooling rock. Their technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic, their understanding of the universe so complete that they could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. The blade wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, a test, an inheritance left for whoever might prove worthy. The architects had foreseen a time when the galaxy would face a threat that could end all life, all possibility, all hope. They had prepared for that moment by creating tools and leaving them scattered across worlds where developing species might eventually find them. But the blade chose its wielder as much as the wielder chose it. It measured not just courage or strength, but something deeper. The capacity for growth, for sacrifice, for becoming more than what nature had originally intended. Felt the weapon evaluating him, sifting through his memories and motivations with gentle but inexorable thoroughness. It saw his frustration with the quiet life on 442C, his dreams of adventure among the stars. But it also saw his genuine care for others, his instinct to help even when it meant personal cost, his stubborn refusal to give up when others had written off a situation as hopeless. The evaluation took only seconds in real time, though it felt like hours. When it ended, found himself holding the blade with confidence, as if he had trained with it for years. Knowledge flowed into his mind, not just how to use the weapon, but understanding of the larger situation facing the galaxy. The threat the architects had foreseen was already stirring. In the dark spaces between stars, something ancient and hungry was awakening. The Devourers, as the Blade's memories named them, were not truly alive in any sense that biological creatures would understand. They were entropy given purpose, destruction with intelligence, the embodiment of the universe's tendency toward heat death. They had appeared before, in cycles spanning millions of years. Each time, they had consumed entire galactic civilizations before returning to their long sleep. The architects had been the first to recognize the pattern, the first to prepare for it. But even their vast knowledge hadn't been enough to stop the Devourers permanently. Instead, they had chosen to plant seeds. Tools, weapons, and most importantly, knowledge scattered across the galaxy in the hope that younger species might succeed where the architects had failed. Pulled his consciousness back from the Blade's vast store of memories. The chamber around him looked the same, but his perspective had fundamentally changed. He was no longer just a bored teenager looking for adventure. He was the inheritor of a responsibility that spanned geological ages. The weapon felt natural in his hands now, perfectly balanced despite its size. He could sense its capabilities extending far beyond mere cutting or stabbing. It could channel energy in ways that human science was only beginning to understand. It could interface with technology across the electromagnetic spectrum. Most importantly, it could enhance its wielder's natural abilities in ways that bordered on miraculous. But power came with price. Could feel the Blade's expectations settling around him like armor. It would make him faster, stronger, more resilient than any normal human. But it also demanded that he use those gifts responsibly. The weapon had standards, and it would withdraw its cooperation if its wielder proved unworthy. More immediately, realized he had a problem. How exactly did you explain to your parents that you had stumbled across an ancient alien artifact that had chosen you to help save the galaxy? His mother already worried about his tendency to explore dangerous places. This development would probably trigger a complete parental meltdown. He made his way back through the tunnels, the blade somehow folding itself into a more manageable size as he walked. By the time he reached the elevator platform, it had become something that looked almost like an oversized hiking staff. Still obviously not normal, but at least not immediately recognizable as a weapon of cosmic significance. The ride back to the surface gave him time to think. The Blade's memories had shown him glimpses of the larger galactic community that existed beyond humanity's small corner of space. Dozens of species scattered across hundreds of worlds, most of them completely unaware that others existed. Humanity was actually one of the more advanced civilizations, despite being relative newcomers to interstellar travel. But advancement was relative. Compared to the architects, every current species was barely out of the Stone Age. The Devourers, when they finally stirred to full wakefulness, would find the galaxy even less prepared than it had been during previous cycles. Unless someone changed the equation. Emerged from the mining facility as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that were unique to 442C's atmospheric composition. The walk back to town would take about an hour, giving him more time to process what had happened. The Blade's presence in his mind was subtle but constant now. Not controlling, but advising. Like having access to a library that contained the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel before humans had discovered agriculture. He paused at the crest of a hill overlooking the small colony settlement where he had lived his entire life. 30,000 people calling themselves pioneers, completely unaware that they were part of a galactic community numbering in the billions. The lights beginning to twinkle in windows below represented everything he had ever known. But the Blade's memories showed him so much more. Cities that floated among the clouds of gas giant planets. Space stations the size of moons, housing populations larger than entire worlds. Beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form thousands of years ago. The galaxy was vast and wonderful and terrible in ways that human imagination had barely begun to grasp. And somewhere in the dark between stars, ancient hunger was beginning to stir. Started down the hill toward home, his mind already working on the problems ahead. The blade could make him individually more capable, but saving the galaxy would require more than one enhanced human, no matter how well armed. He needed allies, resources, and most importantly, he needed to find the other architect artifacts before someone less qualified stumbled across them. His wrist device chimed with an incoming message from his mother, asking if he would be home for dinner. Smiled and sent back a confirmation. Some things remained normal, at least for now. But as he walked through the gathering darkness, he could feel the blade's anticipation mixing with his own. Tomorrow, his real education would begin. The architects had left more than just weapons scattered across the galaxy. They had left clues, maps, and tests designed to guide worthy inheritors toward the knowledge they would need. Had spent 17 years being ordinary. Tonight, as he sat down to dinner with his completely unsuspecting family, he began planning how to become something extraordinary. The galaxy's salvation might depend on a teenager who had never been more than a few dozen kilometers from where he was born. But as the blade's quiet presence reminded him, the architects had chosen their inheritance sites carefully. Heroes weren't born in palaces or academies. They were forged in forgotten places, by those brave enough to reach for mysteries in the dark. Cut into his mother's pot roast and smiled at his father's questions about his day, all while ancient alien knowledge settled into his consciousness like silt in still water. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of becoming the person the galaxy needed. Tonight, he was still just a teenager with a secret that could change everything. The blade rested against his chair, disguised as an innocent walking stick, patiently waiting for its wielder to fully comprehend the magnitude of what lay ahead. In the depths of space, something stirred in its eons-long slumber, drawn by the activation of architect technology after of silence. The first move in a cosmic game had been made. 3 weeks after discovering the blade, had developed an entirely new appreciation for the phrase, "Be careful what you wish for." His quiet life on 442C had become anything but ordinary, though he was doing his best to keep the extraordinary parts hidden from everyone around him. The changes had started small. He found himself waking up an hour before his alarm, feeling more rested than he had in years. His reflexes had sharpened noticeably. When his younger sister accidentally knocked a glass off the kitchen counter, caught it without conscious thought, moving faster than should have been humanly possible. His parents attributed these improvements to a new exercise routine he claimed to have started. The truth was considerably more complex. Every night after his family had gone to sleep, would sneak out to practice with the blade in the abandoned areas outside the colony. The weapon was a patient teacher, guiding him through exercises that seemed to rewrite his understanding of what the human body could accomplish. But the blade was teaching him more than combat techniques. Each session brought new revelations about the galactic situation. The architect databases contained detailed information about dozens of species, their capabilities, their weaknesses, and their current development levels. Humanity, he learned, was considered promising but unpredictable by most galactic observers. Humans had developed faster than expected, but also in unexpected directions. Where other species had focused on either technological advancement or biological enhancement, humans had pursued both simultaneously while also maintaining a stubborn independence that made them difficult to categorize. This combination of traits had caught the attention of various galactic factions, most of whom were carefully avoiding direct contact until they could better understand human motivations and capabilities. Was absorbing this information during his nightly training session when the blade suddenly went rigid in his hands. Danger, it communicated, not in words but in a flood of urgent impressions. Something was coming. He looked up at the night sky, following the weapon's guidance. There, barely visible among the stars, something was moving. Not the gentle drift of orbital mechanics, but purposeful acceleration toward the planet's surface. The approaching object was small, about the size of a personal spacecraft, but its energy signature was unlike anything in human databases. The blade's analysis suggested it belonged to a species called the traders and information brokers who operated throughout this region of the galaxy. Felt his heart rate spike. First contact with an alien species, and he was apparently going to handle it personally. The logical thing would be to contact the colonial authorities, let them deal with whatever was happening. But the Blade's memories suggested that wouldn't end well. They were not hostile, but they were cautious to the point of paranoia. Sudden exposure to an entire human settlement would likely send them fleeing back into deep space, taking with them any chance of learning why they had come here. The spacecraft landed in a clearing about 2 kilometers from its position. He could see its hull glowing faintly in the darkness, still hot from atmospheric entry. The design was elegant in a way that human engineering hadn't yet achieved, all flowing curves and integrated systems. Approached carefully, the Blade providing guidance about customs and communication protocols. They were a peaceful species, but they had survived in the dangerous regions between major galactic powers by being extremely good at reading threats and responding appropriately. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss and got his first look at a non-human intelligence. The who emerged was roughly humanoid, but clearly evolved from different evolutionary pressures. Taller than by almost a foot, with elongated limbs and fingers that ended in what looked like natural tools rather than simple digits. Its skin had a silver-blue tint that seemed to shift slightly in the moonlight. But it was the being's eyes that struck most forcefully. They were large, luminous, and held an intelligence that felt both alien and somehow familiar. When it spoke, its voice came from a translation device that rendered the words in accented but understandable English. "Young human," it said, inclining its head in what the Blade identified as a gesture of respectful greeting. "I am trader of the merchant vessel Wandering Prophet. I have come seeking the one who awakened the architect artifact." Tried to keep his expression neutral, but apparently his surprise was visible enough for the alien to interpret. "Please," continued, "I mean no harm. My sensors detected the activation signature 3 weeks ago. Such events are significant. There are others who will have noticed as well, and not all of them have peaceful intentions." The Blade whispered guidance into his mind. They were indeed peaceful, but they were also motivated primarily by profit. This one had come not out of altruism, but because architect artifacts represented enormous value in certain galactic markets. "What do you want?" asked, deciding that directness might be the best approach. Elongated features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "Knowledge, young inheritor, and to offer a trade that could benefit us both. You possess something of incredible value, but you lack context. I can provide context for a price." "What kind of context?" "The galaxy is changing," said, settling into what appeared to be a comfortable position despite the lack of any apparent seating. "The devourers stir in the deep dark. Old alliances are fracturing as species prepare for what may come. And architect artifacts are being activated across multiple star systems for the first time in recorded history." This was new information. The Blade's memories had suggested that might be the only current inheritor, but apparently that assumption was incorrect. "How many others?" asked. 7 confirmed activations in the past month," replied. "Possibly more that have avoided detection. This suggests either remarkable coincidence or that the architects programmed their artifacts to awaken simultaneously when certain galactic conditions were met." The Blade confirmed this theory. It had indeed been designed to activate when specific threat parameters were detected. The fact that multiple artifacts were waking up meant that the devourer stirring was further advanced than had realized. "You said others were coming," continued. "Others who aren't peaceful." His expression became more serious. "The hegemony has noticed the activation patterns. They are dispatching collection teams to secure any artifacts they can locate. The hegemony believes that superior technology should belong to superior species, and they do not consider humans to qualify for that category." Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The Blade's databases contained extensive information about the hegemony, a coalition of species that had dominated their region of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They were not evil in any traditional sense, but they were utterly convinced of their own superiority and right to rule. Humans, with their chaotic approach to development and stubborn independence, represented exactly the kind of unpredictable element that the hegemony preferred to control or eliminate. "How long do we have?" asked. "Their closest collection ship is perhaps 6 days from this system," replied. "Possibly less if they choose to push their engines beyond safe parameters. They will arrive expecting to find a primitive human settlement and a poorly defended artifact. If they encounter organized resistance, they will simply destroy everything from orbit rather than risk complications. The casual way the alien described the potential annihilation of his entire world sent anger flaring through him. The blade responded to his emotional state, its presence in his mind becoming more pronounced. Apparently noticed the change because its posture shifted into something more alert. "Ah," it said softly. "The weapon recognizes a threat to its wielder's people. Fascinating. The architect artifacts were indeed well designed." "What exactly are you offering?" asked, struggling to keep his voice level. "Passage off-world for you and the artifact," replied immediately. "My ship can avoid hegemony patrols, and there are systems where you could continue your development in safety. In exchange, I would ask only for detailed scans of the artifact and perhaps a small sample of its material for analysis." The blade's response was immediate and negative. The weapon would not allow itself to be damaged or studied by non-inheritors. More importantly, it projected absolute certainty that running away would not solve the larger problem. The Devourers were coming, and when they arrived, there would be nowhere in the galaxy to hide. The only path to survival lay through confronting the threat directly, and that required inheritors who were willing to stand and fight rather than flee. Found himself agreeing with the weapons assessment, though the logical part of his mind pointed out that he was a 17-year-old human with 3 weeks of alien combat training facing off against interstellar empires and cosmic threats. "I'm not leaving," he said finally. His large eyes seemed to grow even larger. "Young human, you cannot hope to defend this world against a hegemony collection team. They possess technology that your people cannot even comprehend, let alone counter." "Maybe," agreed, "but the artifact chose me for a reason, and it's telling me that running away won't solve anything in the long term." The alien trader was quiet for several moments, apparently processing this information. Finally, it spoke again. "The architect databases contain information about other artifact sites," said slowly. "If you will not abandon your world, perhaps you could at least strengthen it. There are weapons, shields, and other tools hidden across this region of space. Most have not yet been activated." This caught attention. The blade confirmed that there were indeed other architect installations within a few days' travel of 442C. Not all of them contained weapons, but some held defensive technologies that could protect an entire planet. "What would you want in return for that information?" asked. "The opportunity to study the artifacts you recover," replied. "Not to damage them, but to understand their operating principles. The architects represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Their technology could advance my people's development by." The blade considered this proposal carefully. They were indeed peaceful and trustworthy by galactic standards. Allowing them to study architect technology might actually help prepare the galaxy for what was coming. But there were conditions. Would have to accept certain restrictions and safeguards. Most importantly, any knowledge gained would have to be shared with all species willing to join the fight against the Devourers. Outlined these terms, surprised at how naturally the negotiation flowed. The blade was guiding him, but the decisions felt like his own. Accepted the conditions with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "A worthy proposal, young inheritor, though I should warn you that retrieving these other artifacts will not be simple. Some are guarded by automated defense systems. Others have been hidden in locations that are actively dangerous even to approach." "How dangerous?" asked. The alien's expression suggested amusement. "One is located in the core of a moon that experiences tidal stresses sufficient to most materials every few hours. Another rests at the bottom of an ocean on a world where the local ecosystem includes predators that hunt by sensing electromagnetic activity." The blade provided additional details about these locations, along with strategies for safely approaching each site. The challenges were significant, but not insurmountable for someone with architect technology and knowledge. Made his decision, "We'll need a ship." "I can provide transportation," offered. "My vessel is designed for discretion rather than combat, but it possesses certain capabilities that your people's technology cannot yet duplicate." Over the next several hours, they planned out an expedition to recover the 3 most accessible artifacts before the Hegemony Collection team arrived. It would be tight timing, requiring them to move fast and avoid attention from the various factions that monitored this region of space. as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, prepared to return to its ship. Before departing, the alien trader offered one final piece of advice. "Young inheritor," it said, "the path you have chosen is dangerous beyond your current comprehension. The galaxy contains wonders and terrors that would break minds less prepared than yours. But the architects did not make their choices lightly. If their artifact selected you, there are capabilities within you that you have not yet discovered." After departed, made his way back to the colony, his mind racing with possibilities and concerns. In 6 days, potentially hostile aliens would arrive expecting to find a defenseless human settlement and an unprotected artifact. Instead, they would find whatever could make of himself in the time remaining. He slipped back into his family's house just as his parents were beginning their morning routine. Everything looked exactly as it had when he left, but felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling more firmly around his shoulders. His mother asked if he wanted breakfast before school. Accepted, realizing that today might be his last day of anything resembling a normal life. But as he sat at the kitchen table, listening to his sister complain about an upcoming test, and his father discuss plans for expanding the colony's agricultural systems, felt determination crystallizing within him. These people, this small community on the edge of nowhere, represented everything worth protecting in the galaxy. If alien empires and cosmic threats wanted to take that away, they would have to go through him first. The blade hummed with approval at his thoughts, already beginning to calculate optimal training schedules for the days ahead. Finished his breakfast and prepared for school, knowing that his real education was about to begin. The Hegemony Collection ship arrived exactly when had predicted, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the 442 system with the casual arrogance of a power that had never known defeat. Its sensors immediately began scanning the inner planets, searching for the electromagnetic signature that had drawn them across 50 light-years of space. What they found was not what they expected. Stood on the observation deck of ship, watching the massive alien vessel materialize against the star field. 6 days of frantic preparation had transformed him in ways that still felt impossible. The Blade's training regimen had pushed his human physiology far beyond its normal limits, while the recovered architect artifacts had provided tools that made him feel like he was cheating at reality itself. The first artifact they had retrieved from the tide-stressed moon had been a personal shield generator that could deflect energy weapons powerful enough to crack planets. The second, pulled from the bottom of a monster-filled ocean while wearing environmental armor that made him functionally invulnerable, had turned out to be a communication device that could interface with any technology in the galaxy. The third artifact had nearly killed him. Hidden in the radioactive core of a dead star, it had required to pilot a ship through gravitational forces that would have torn apart any normal vessel. But the prize had been worth the risk. The artifact was a fabrication unit that could create almost any tool or weapon from raw materials, guided by architect databases that contained the technological knowledge of a civilization that had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. More importantly, the fabricator had created something that human military theorists would have considered impossible. A planetary defense grid that could be deployed and activated in less than 72 hours, powered by tapping into the planet's own magnetic field, and capable of protecting everything within a sphere extending past both moons. The Hegemony ship was about to encounter the first human world that could actually defend itself. "They're transmitting," announced from the pilot's station. The alien trader had proven invaluable during their artifact recovery missions, providing not just transportation, but also expertise in dealing with the automated systems they had encountered. "Standard Hegemony protocols. They're ordering the planet to surrender the artifact and submit to administrative oversight." Activated the communication device, feeling its interface merge seamlessly with both the ship systems and the planetary defense network he had spent the last 3 days installing. When he responded, his voice was broadcast simultaneously from orbit and from transmitters across 442C's surface. "This is speaking for the human colony on 442C, he said, surprised at how calm he sounded. "You are trespassing in human space. Withdraw immediately." The response came back within seconds, transmitted in multiple languages and accompanied by what the Blade identified as psychological warfare frequencies, designed to induce fear and submission in most galactic species. Primitive human, you will surrender the architect artifact in your possession and submit to hegemony authority. Resistance will result in the sterilization of your world and the termination of your species' expansion rights. Felt the blade's presence intensify, its accumulated knowledge flowing through his consciousness. The hegemony ship was impressive by the standards of most galactic civilizations, but it was also predictable. Their technology had reached a plateau centuries ago, focusing on incremental improvements rather than revolutionary advances. They had no experience dealing with architect technology in the hands of someone willing to use it. "I'll give you one more chance to withdraw peacefully," transmitted. "After that, I'll consider your presence an act of war against humanity." The alien response was immediate and devastating. Lance beams that could slice through the hulls of battleships erupted from the hegemony vessel, targeting what their sensors identified as the most significant population centers on the planet below. The beams struck defense grid and simply vanished, absorbed and redirected into the planet's magnetic field, where they harmlessly dissipated as aurora-like light shows in the upper atmosphere. Allowed himself a moment to savor the shocked silence that followed, then activated the next phase of his preparations. The fabrication unit had spent the last 2 days creating something that would have impressed even the architects. Not just weapons, though those were certainly included, but a complete transformation of 442C's technological capabilities. The planet now possessed manufacturing facilities that could produce ships, weapons, and infrastructure at speeds that would take other civilizations decades to achieve. More importantly, had used the communication device to reach out to other architect inheritors across the galaxy. 7 others had awakened to their responsibilities, scattered across different species and star systems. Not all of them had been as successful as in their early trials, but each had contributed something to the growing alliance. "Hegemony vessel," transmitted, "you are now facing the combined resources of the architect inheritance. This is your final warning." The response was immediate escalation. The hegemony ship opened fire with everything it possessed, pouring enough destructive energy into space to sterilize a dozen worlds. But instead of striking the planet, the attacks were intercepted by weapons platforms that materialized around 442C like flowers blooming from nothing. The platforms had been constructed in hidden asteroid facilities using technologies that made human engineering look like primitive stone tools. Each one was capable of independent thought and action, guided by artificial intelligences that incorporated fragments of architect consciousness. The battle that followed lasted exactly 97 seconds. The hegemony ship was not destroyed because it had given specific instructions about minimizing casualties. Instead, it found itself completely disabled, its weapons systems offline, and its propulsion engines safely contained within stasis fields that would prevent any attempts at self-destruction. Opened a communication channel to the disabled vessel. "Attention hegemony forces. Your ship is disabled but intact. Your crew is unharmed but confined. You have 2 choices. You can accept transport back to your home systems with the message that humanity is now under architect protection, or you can remain here as our guests while we determine how to integrate your people into the alliance we're building." The response, when it finally came, was transmitted in what the Blade identified as the formal diplomatic language of the hegemony's ruling council. "Impossible. No primitive species possesses technology sufficient to challenge hegemony authority. What are you?" Considered his answer carefully. The truth was that he was still, in many ways, the same 17-year-old who had been exploring abandoned mining tunnels just weeks ago. But he was also something more now. The Blade had awakened capabilities within him that felt both completely natural and utterly alien to human experience. "We're what the architects intended us to become," he replied finally. "The species that would stand when the real threat arrived." Over the next several hours, found himself conducting the most important diplomatic negotiations in human history. The hegemony ship's crew consisted of representatives from 4 different species, each with their own perspectives on galactic politics and survival strategies. The captain, a being called or from a species that looked like a cross between an octopus and a crystal formation, eventually agreed to transport a message back to the hegemony leadership. The message was simple. The galaxy was about to face a threat that made all current political considerations irrelevant, and survival would require cooperation rather than domination. but knew that words alone wouldn't be sufficient. The hegemony, like most established galactic powers, would need proof that the Devourer threat was real and immediate. Fortunately, the communication device had been picking up signals from the deep dark between galaxies. The Devourers were indeed stirring, their vast intelligences turning their attention toward this region of space after eons of slumber. The signals were faint and fragmented, but they painted a picture of something that made the hegemony look like children playing with toys. Shared the relevant data with Orr, watching as the alien captain's crystalline features shifted through what appeared to be the emotional spectrum from disbelief to horror to grim determination. If this data is accurate, Orr said finally, then every dispute in the galaxy becomes meaningless. We would need to unite every species, every resource, every ship and weapon that exists. That's exactly what we're trying to do, replied. The architect artifacts weren't just left for humans. They were scattered among dozens of species, waiting for the right moment to awaken. We're building an alliance that spans the entire galaxy. Over the following days, found himself at the center of communications that stretched across light years of space. The other architect inheritors were reporting similar encounters with established galactic powers. Some had resulted in conflict, others in negotiation, but the pattern was clear. The galaxy was beginning to unite against a common threat, with architect technology providing the tools necessary to make such unity possible. But also learned that he was unique among the inheritors in several important ways. His blade was apparently the original template from which the others had been created, making it both more powerful and more flexible than the artifacts recovered by other species. More importantly, his rapid development and successful integration of multiple artifact systems had caught the attention of something that had been waiting in the deepest databases. The message arrived as was overseeing the construction of humanity's first interstellar fleet. Ships that incorporated architect technology with human design philosophy, creating vessels that were both more advanced than anything else in the galaxy and uniquely suited to human strengths. The communication bypassed every security system and interfaced directly with his consciousness, carrying a weight of authority that made it clear this was not another inheritor trying to make contact. "Greetings, heir of the blade," the message began, its tone suggesting vast age and patient wisdom. "I am the last active fragment of the architect collective consciousness, preserved within the quantum structures of the primary artifact network. You have exceeded all projections for development speed and alliance building. It is time for the next phase of preparation." Found himself pulled into a virtual environment that felt more real than physical space. Around him stretched what appeared to be a vast library containing the accumulated knowledge and experience of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever produced. "The Devourers are not merely destroyers," the architect fragment continued. "They are the universe's immune system, designed to prevent any single species or alliance from growing powerful enough to threaten the fundamental structure of reality. Previous civilizations, including our own, failed to understand this until it was too late." Images flowed through consciousness, showing him the true scope of what they were facing. The Devourers were not aliens in any conventional sense. They were manifestations of physical law itself, entropy given purpose and direction. They could not be negotiated with, reasoned with, or deterred from their function. But they could be. "The key is not to defeat the Devourers," the architect fragment explained, "but to evolve beyond the conditions that trigger their awakening. This requires not just technological advancement, but fundamental changes in how intelligent species relate to the universe and to each other." Felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling even more firmly around him. It wasn't enough to build an alliance capable of fighting the Devourers. He needed to guide the galaxy's civilizations toward a form of existence that would make the Devourer response unnecessary. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Analysis of current awakening patterns suggests perhaps 50 standard years before the Devourers reach full activity," the architect fragment replied. "Sufficient time if the alliance develops according to projections, but there will be resistance from those who prefer the current order of things." Over the following weeks, found himself becoming something that human language didn't have adequate words to describe. Part diplomat, part general, part teacher, and part evolutionary catalyst. The blade had awakened capabilities within him that allowed him to interface directly with minds across multiple species, sharing knowledge and understanding at speeds that made traditional communication look glacial. The alliance grew rapidly, incorporating not just the species that had found architect artifacts, but also the various galactic powers that had initially opposed them. The hegemony became some of the most effective advocates for unity, their rigid organizational structure proving ideal for coordinating resources across multiple star systems. But never forgot that he was, at core, still a human teenager from a backwater colony. When the first Interstellar Council convened on a neutral station constructed specifically for the purpose, he made sure that his parents were present as representatives of humanity's civilian government. His mother's reaction to learning that her son had become the galaxy's unofficial leader was approximately as explosive as he had expected. His father took the news with the sort of practical acceptance that had helped humans adapt to frontier life. His sister mostly wanted to know if she could get alien technology upgrades for her personal devices. The council session itself was unlike anything that had ever been attempted in galactic history. Representatives from 47 different species, many of whom had never been in the same star system before, working together to plan a defense against a threat that most of them couldn't even conceptualize. Addressed the assembly using the communication device to translate his words into every language and thought pattern represented in the room. "We are not here to create a new empire or impose one species' vision on the galaxy," he began. "We are here because the universe itself is about to test whether intelligent life deserves to continue existing. The Devourers are not evil. They are not conquerors. They are gardeners, and they have decided that our garden has grown beyond acceptable parameters." He shared the architect memories, showing the assembled representatives exactly what they were facing. The initial reactions ranged from disbelief to terror to anger, but eventually settled into the grim determination that had allowed each of these species to achieve interstellar travel. "The good news," continued, "is that we don't have to fight them. We have to prove that we've grown beyond the need for their intervention. This means not just technological advancement, but fundamental changes in how we organize ourselves and relate to the universe." The debates that followed lasted for weeks. Some species argued for immediate military preparation, focusing on building weapons capable of destroying devourer manifestations. Others advocated for hiding, dispersing across the galaxy so widely that the devourers couldn't eliminate everyone at once. Found himself advocating for a third path, guided by insights from the architect fragment and his own developing understanding of cosmic-scale evolutionary pressures. "We need to become something new," he argued. "Not human, not hegemony, but a truly galactic civilization that operates according to principles the universe recognizes as sustainable." The alliance that emerged from these negotiations was unlike anything that had existed in galactic history. Rather than being based on conquest or dominance, it was built around mutual growth and shared responsibility for cosmic stewardship. Each member species contributed their unique strengths while accepting guidance from the architect artifacts in areas where their development had been limited. Humans provided adaptability and innovation. They contributed trade networks and resource management. The hegemony species offered organizational structures and large-scale engineering capabilities. Found himself at the center of this transformation, no longer just a human teenager with an alien weapon, but something new that embodied the best characteristics of multiple species, while remaining fundamentally committed to the values that had made humanity worth preserving in the first place. When the Devourer advance scouts finally arrived in the galaxy, they found something that had never existed before. Not a collection of competing civilizations that needed to be pruned back to sustainable levels, but a single unified intelligence spread across billions of individuals and thousands of worlds. The scouts observed for several months, analyzing the new galactic civilization according to criteria that had been established when the universe was young. Finally, they transmitted their findings back to the vast intelligences that waited in the deep dark between galaxies. The response was immediate and unprecedented in cosmic history. The Devourers, for the first time since the universe had cooled enough to support complex matter, chose to return to their slumber without intervening. The galaxy had passed their test, stood on the observation deck of the new galactic capital, watching ships from dozens of species working together to construct the infrastructure that would support their expanding civilization. The blade rested easily in his hands now, no longer a foreign artifact, but an extension of his own will and purpose. He was 19 years old and had become something that no previous generation of humans could have imagined. But he was still, at core, the curious teenager who had been willing to reach for mysteries in the dark. The galaxy was safe, at least for now, but knew that this was just the beginning. The universe was vast and full of wonders and challenges that his new civilization was only beginning to discover. Somewhere in the deep dark, other tests waited. Other gardens that might need tending, other species that might need guidance toward sustainable forms of existence. Once a bored teenager from a backwater colony, now stood ready to face whatever the universe might offer. The blade hummed with approval, already calculating optimal approaches to challenges not yet imagined. Behind him, representatives from 47 species worked together to build something that had never existed before. A civilization that could survive any test, grow beyond any limitation, and eventually take its place among the cosmic gardeners who shaped the destiny of reality itself. The galaxy had found its hero. More importantly, it had found its future.